So we are studying about international problems. So under international problems, we are going to highlight three issues which the world faces. These three issues, they are discussing the human rights. And apart from human rights, we shall be discussing about environment and about terrorism. So talking about human rights over here, we see that by the end of World War II, countries throughout the world, 193 countries throughout the world, they started thinking about the human rights, about the individual rights. By the time World War II comes to an end, we see that there are more than 60 million people who lost their lives. These people were not only the soldiers or the combatant group, but they were the civilians. ये आम लोग थे जिन्होंने अपनी जानें गंवा दी थी during the World War II. So by the time World War II comes to an end, we see that ultimately here people throughout the world and the leaders throughout the world, throughout all these countries, they started talking about human rights. So in United Nations organization, there was a lot of discussion which used to happen on human rights then. Many of the countries throughout the world, काफी सारे ऐसे देश थे throughout the world जो वर्ल्ड वॉर टू के बाद अमेरिका का एग्जाम्पल लेते थे और फ्रांस का एग्जाम्पल लेते थे. अमेरिका का एग्जाम्पल इसलिए रहते थे बिकॉज इट वाज द वेरी फर्स्ट कंट्री टू हैव कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड, and more than that it talks about human rights in that. In a similar way, people started taking example from the past history of France, that is from the French Revolution, wherein values such as liberty, equality, fraternity, justice were being used for human rights. So these are human rights. These are basic human rights. You being born as an individual, as a human being, by birth, there are certain rights which are given to you. Apart from this, now we shall talk about the concept of human rights at the international level. Okay. So talking about United Nations Organization, United Nations Organization की अगर बात करें, so after World War II, यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एक लीडर थे जिनका नाम था एलेनोर रूजवेल्ट. So Eleanor Roosevelt, she was basically the wife of Franklin Roosevelt from America. And Eleanor Roosevelt, उनके वजह से हम देखते हैं कि वो ह्यूमन राइट्स का पूरा एक ड्राफ्ट तैयार करते हैं. She says that throughout the world, all those 193 countries which are a part of United Nations Organization, ये सारी कंट्रीज अगर मिल के यूनाइटेड नेशंस के थ्रू अगर वर्ल्ड में पीस मेंटेन करना चाहते हैं, तो फिर उनको यूडीएचआर का ये डिक्लेरेशन मानना पड़ेगा, दैट इज यूनिवर्सल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स. इस डिक्लेरेशन के तहत हम देखते हैं that by the time we see that in United Nations Organization, जब ये UDHR का ड्राफ्ट यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के सामने रखा गया था, 193 कंट्रीज के सामने रखा गया था, then the General Assembly, which is one of the bodies in United Nations Organization, on 10th of December 1948, they agreed कि ये 193 countries जो है ये सारे कंट्रीज signed in United Nations Organization, it has been given over here. Okay. So there are these two documents. The first one is International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the second one is Internal Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So these are two covenants, these are two agreements which have been signed by 193 countries in United Nations Organization, confirming that every individual who lives in these 193 countries, he shall be given the human rights. Okay. I hope you guys have understood till here. There are no doubts till here. So, Honey, you have just posted this that you have some question to be asked. You can just post it in the chat box. Covenant means an agreement. Arman, I hope your question has been answered. कोवनेंट का मतलब होता है अग्रीमेंट। इंटरनेशनल लेवल पे जो कंट्रीज के बीच में अग्रीमेंट साइन होते हैं उसको कोवनेंट बोला जाता है। इट्स काइंड ऑफ अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट। ओके, फाइन। सो नेक्स्ट, टॉकिंग अबाउट ह्यूमन राइट्स। ह्यूमन राइट्स में कौन सी चीजें आनी चाहिए? हर एक नागरिक को थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड, ओके, ही शुड बी गिवन द राइट टू लाइफ। उसको अपनी जिंदगी जीने का मौका मिलना चाहिए। नेक्स्ट, ही शुड बी गिवन द राइट टू फूड। उसको खाना पीना मिलना चाहिए। Above all, he should be given the facility of clothing, food, clothing, shelter, education, and health. So there are questions just coming up over here in the chat box that is this a revision lecture? No, it's not a revision lecture. It's a fresh new chapter that we are doing. So the question is from Honey that India also faces these international problems. Obviously, yes, India does face these international problems. But India is trying its level best. The government is trying its level best to overcome all these problems. Okay, fine. We shall continue ahead with the same thing. So, United Nations Organization. When we talk about United Nations Organization, again, यहाँ पे जो जनरल असेंबली है, द जनरल असेंबली विच इज वन ऑफ द ऑर्गन्स ऑफ यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, इट हैज प्लेड अ वेरी क्रूशियल रोल ड्यूरिंग द टाइम्स ऑफ कोल्ड वॉर। कोल्ड वॉर क्या है मैंने ऑलरेडी ये पहले बता दिया था। ओके, जब भी वर्ल्ड वॉर टू खत्म होने आया था, देयर वाज अ चांस ऑफ वर्ल्ड वॉर थ्री, wherein we see that Russia was standing against America। तो वर्ल्ड वापस दो ग्रुप्स में डिवाइड हो चुका था। ये टाइम था कोल्ड वॉर का, जहां पे कोई एक्चुअली वॉर तो नहीं हुआ, बट या देयर वर अ चांस ऑफ थर्ड वर्ल्ड वॉर। In this time, in such a crucial scenario, इंडिया बीइंग अ कंट्री, इंडिया ये देश ने ये बोला कि अभी ये टाइम नहीं है कि वापस हम दो पावर ब्लॉक्स क्रिएट करके वापस दुनिया में ये तहलका मचाए कि हम वर्ल्ड वॉर थ्री करें। इनफैक्ट एट दिस पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम इंडिया सेड कि वर्ल्ड जो प्रॉब्लम्स फेस कर रहा है, ये प्रॉब्लम्स को कैसे कम कर दिया जाए उसके बारे में सोचना चाहिए। सो देयर वर मेनी इश्यूज सच एज रेशियल सेग्रीगेशन। हम देखते हैं कि अफ्रीका के बहुत सारे देशों में there was a difference which used to be made in between the blacks and the whites। तो इन सारे चीजों पे फिर यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में डिस्कशन होता है। दे से दैट थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड सच अ रेशियल सेग्रीगेशन शुड बी अवॉइडेड। ये ह्यूमन राइट्स के खिलाफ है कि हम किसी को काले या गोरे के बीच में डिस्टिंग्विश करें। Above all, freedom should be given to the colonies। इंडिया जैसे बहुत देश थे जो ब्रिटिशर्स ने कैप्चर करके रखे थे। इंडिया के अलावा और भी दूसरे देश थे जो ब्रिटिशर्स ने नहीं, लेकिन फ्रेंच लोगों ने, डच लोगों ने, स्पेनिश लोगों ने कैप्चर करके रखे थे। तो ये इंडिया जैसी जो कॉलोनीज थी, थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड ये बोला गया कि आज के बाद कॉलोनाइजेशन नहीं होना चाहिए। किसी एडवांस्ड देश को किसी कमजोर देश के ऊपर उसका कभी फायदा नहीं उठाना चाहिए, उसको कैप्चर नहीं करना चाहिए। So freedom was supposed to be given to the colonies. Insistence was being given on democratic system। colonization को छोड़ के हम डेमोक्रेसी को अपनाएं थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड, दैट इज इवन मोर इम्पोर्टेंट। In the modern times we see that there are problems, and these problems, they are the ones which lead to struggle। So these struggles are against racism। हम देखते हैं काफी सारे देशों में आज भी रेसिज्म होता है, डिफरेंसेस होते हैं ब्लैक्स और व्हाइट्स के बीच में। There are border disputes which constantly happen in between the countries। Border disputes as what you see in between India and China, border disputes that you see in between India and Nepal, border disputes that you see in between India and Pakistan। So these border issues are constantly there throughout the world। Apart from that, talking about terrorism, that is one more another bigger thing that the world is fighting against with। There are so many terrorist groups throughout the world। For example, we have Taliban, we have ISIS, we have Om Shrimrikyo, तो ऐसे बहुत सारे टेररिस्ट ग्रुप्स है अगेंस्ट विच द कंट्रीज आर फाइटिंग टिल डेट. And these problems, they are the ones which actually, these problems are the ones which actually are jeopardizing the human rights. Geoparadising का मतलब है it is hampering, it is affecting, it is threatening the human rights. Fine. So these are some of the things which we just discussed over here in this paragraph. If you have any issues or doubts still here, just let me know. Then we'll move ahead with the chapter. So there is a question again from, okay, there are two, three people who have asked the same question. What is racism? Racism का मतलब है the difference which are being done in between the blacks and the whites. उसको हम racism बोलते हैं. Okay. Racial segregation का मतलब भी वही है, racism का मतलब भी वही है. Fine. I hope Prapti, then Arman, and there is one more another person from Takshashila branch. They have asked the same question. I hope your doubts have been cleared. What is racism? What is racial segregation? It means you distinguish in between the blacks and the whites, in between the Westerners and the Eastern people. And next, there is one more another question which has been asked by Prapti. What is geoparadising? The same question has been asked by yet another person. Ria has also asked the same question. Geoparadising का मतलब है hampering, threatening the human rights. Next, there is yet another question. What is natural right? This question has been asked by Sanskar from Chembur. So, what is natural rights? That is your birthright. तुम एक इंसान पैदा हुए हो, कोई जानवर पैदा नहीं हुए हो. You are born as a human being. तो एक इंसान जब भी पैदा होता है तो उसका ये हक है when he comes into this world that he has to be given that freedom, he has to be given liberty to live his own life the way he wants. Okay. तुम्हें पैदा होते ही अगर कोई तुम्हें जेल में डाल देगा या तुम्हें पैदा होते ही अगर कोई तुम्हें यू नो गुलामी करवाएगा, so that is wrong. Okay. I hope the questions have been answered. Okay, there's one more another question which has been asked. What is colonization? So colonization means ब्रिटेन एक बहुत ही एडवांस्ड देश था. ब्रिटेन ने इंडिया को कैप्चर किया क्योंकि लिए इंडिया वो टाइम पे बहुत ही अंडर डेवलप्ड था. So when an advanced country is capturing an underdeveloped country like India, this is called as colonization. ठीक है, तुमने किसी और देश पे कब्जा कर लिया, उसको हम कॉलोनाइजेशन बोलते हैं. So just like India, there were many other countries in the world which had been colonized by many of the European powers then. Fine. We'll move ahead with the next part now. We'll move ahead with the next part now. So apart from the concept of human rights सिर्फ racism या border issues या terrorism के बारे में बात नहीं है. It is much more wider in scope. There are many other things which fall under the human rights. For example, हम देखते हैं कि आज के डेट में पेंडेमिक चल रहा है. There is coronavirus issue which is going on. It's a contagious disease. ये एक इंसान से दूसरे इंसान में ये disease pass on हो रहा है. So what should exactly happen? The governments throughout the countries, जितनी भी देशों की जितनी भी सरकारें हैं, उनको ट्राई करना चाहिए कि वो ऐसे इश्यूज को वो सॉल्व करे, ना ही कि और ज्यादा लोगों को मरने दे. So there are certain issues which are, global in nature, such as contagious diseases. You have to try stopping those contagious diseases so that it does not kill more a number of people. We should see through it that we protect our environment. अगर कोई industries है या कोई ऐसे businesses है जिसके वजह से एनवायरनमेंट का नुकसान हो रहा है और ज्यादा डिफॉरेस्टेशन हो रहा है, then such a thing has to be stopped. Even this is against the fundamental rights. In a similar way, when we talk about natural disasters, जब भी हम लोग disasters की बात करते हैं, earthquakes की बात करते हैं, tsunamis की बात करते हैं, in times of such natural disasters, it is again the duty of the governments throughout the world. अगर सरकारें वीक है, देश बहुत कमजोर है, देश बहुत गरीब है, then it is the duty of the other countries in the world that they should go ahead and help such countries wherein the people have been affected. This is how you can preserve the human rights globally. Fine. जब भी ह्यूमन राइट्स तुम प्रोटेक्ट करोगे तब जाके हमारा एनवायरनमेंट ज्यादा अच्छा होगा and there will be more and more development happening in the world. So I hope you guys have understood till here. We'll quickly finish this next little part over here. It's very simple. यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का जो ह्यूमन राइट्स का पूरा कानून बनाया गया है उसमें 30 आर्टिकल्स है, उसमें कुल मिला के 30 कानून है. सम ऑफ द लॉज इट टॉक्स अबाउट इकोनॉमिक राइट्स. मतलब यहाँ पे ये बोला जाता है कि तुम इंसानों से थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड जितना काम करवाते हो उतना उनका पैसा भी मिलना चाहिए. सो इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट द राइट टू वर्क. इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट इक्वल पे फॉर इक्वल वर्क. Above all, it is also saying कि जब भी यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ने ये डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स बनाया था, इट ऑल्सो टॉक्स अबाउट द डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ राइट्स ऑफ चाइल्ड. मतलब जो थ्रू आउट द वर्ल्ड जो बच्चे हैं उनको ये भी राइट्स को प्रिजर्व किया जाना चाहिए. दैट इज इक्वली मोर इम्पोर्टेंट because we see that there were a lot of small children which used to die in the concentration camps during the times of World War II. There is one more another question which has been asked by Sanskar again. So he has asked, what is democratic constitution? Constitution का मतलब होता है एक लॉ बुक. ओके, जो कानूनों की किताब, जो कानूनों की बुक होती है उसको हम कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बोलते हैं. तो एक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के हिसाब से पूरा देश चलता है. डेमोक्रेटिक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का मतलब ये है एक ऐसा देश जहां पे सरकार लोगों ने बनाई है, इलेक्शंस होते हैं और लोगों के चुने हुए जो नेता है वो देश को चलाते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंडिया, इट्स अ डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री. इट इज गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द पीपल, फॉर द पीपल, बाय द पीपल. एग्जैक्टली, ऋषिका, you are right. Next, there is yet another question which has been asked. It has been asked from Takshashila. So, what is regime? Regime का मतलब है एक रूल. कुछ समय के लिए, कुछ सालों के लिए जो रूल होता है. Britishers, they ruled over India for more than 150 years. That's a regime, British regime. Next, we'll talk about the human rights and India. We'll talk about human rights and we'll talk about India. So India, you should know this, it is one of the first 50 countries which became a part of United Nations Organization. The United Nations Organization में जो 193 कंट्रीज हैं उसमें से सबसे पहली 50 कंट्रीज में से इंडिया एक देश था. Because India is a part of United Nations Organization, it preserves the human rights in its own country. इसीलिए इंडिया बहुत ही आगे है जहाँ पे वो ह्यूमन राइट्स को बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंस देता है हमारे देश में. We should be thankful that we are the citizens of India, and because you are the citizen of India, you have been given many fundamental rights inside the country. If you notice these fundamental rights, here we have been given protection to the weaker sections of the society. इंडिया में जो women होती है या इंडिया के जो minorities है, ऐसी communities जो बहुत ही कम population में आती है, for such weaker sections of the society, the Constitution of India gives special rights, it gives special protection, In fact, it is said in the year 1993, हम देखते हैं कि इंडिया ने ये डॉक्यूमेंट साइन किया था ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट, जहाँ पे सेंट्रल लेवल पे और स्टेट लेवल पे दोनों लेवल्स पे हमने ह्यूमन राइट्स के लिए एक कमीशन तैयार किया है, एक टीम तैयार किया है जो ह्यूमन राइट्स को प्रिजर्व करने का काम करता है। बाय एनी चांस अगर कोई भी इंडिया की सरकार हो या कोई भी इंडिया के सिटीजन्स हो, अगर वो आपसे आपके ह्यूमन राइट्स छीन लेते हैं, you can go to the Supreme Court, you can go to the High Court if your fundamental rights, if your human rights are violated, और तुमने जिसके खिलाफ भी कंप्लेन की है उसके खिलाफ कार्रवाई होगी, and it is considered as a cognizance offense. It is considered as a criminal offense. I hope you guys have understood till here. There are no issues till here. In case if you have any queries, then just let me know, or else we'll move ahead with the next part of the chapter. So there is an example which has been given by Arman about the minority. It is about Parsis. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And so there is a question being asked that if a woman she is pregnant and if she has been put into the prison cell and she doesn't have a family, what shall happen to the child which shall take birth? Usually, such children are being put into orphanages, into government orphanages. It is the government who bears the expenditure of the child for some number of years then. Okay. Mm, declaration. This question has been asked by Kaushiki that what does declaration exactly mean? डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स वो एक ड्राफ्ट है, पूरा नाम है यूनिवर्सल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स। ये उस ड्राफ्ट का नाम है जिसमें सारे ह्यूमन राइट्स को लिखा गया है। जब भी यूनिवर्सल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स के इस ड्राफ्ट को, जहां पे ह्यूमन राइट्स को लिस्ट किए गए हैं, जब ये 193 देश इसको मानते हैं, तब जाके उन देशों ने अग्रीमेंट साइन की है कि वो अपने देश में भी ये ह्यूमन राइट्स लागू करेंगे। Okay. So there is a question. It's a very nice question which has been asked by Arman. He's from DN Nagar. He says that can you tell what type of rights are given to the minorities? This is a very nice question. In fact, talking about minorities, we have. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay. So talking about minorities, there are minorities throughout the country. कुछ ऐसी minorities हैं, for example we can talk about Sindhis, ठीक है? These Sindhis, they have a specific language which they speak, but this language does not have a script. तुम ये language को लिख नहीं सकते हो। तो ऐसे minorities को इंडिया की सरकार प्रमोट करती है, उनको बढ़ावा देती है कि वो अपने मैन्यूस्क्रिप्ट्स तैयार करे, वो अपनी लैंग्वेज का एक स्क्रिप्ट तैयार करे, अपनी लैंग्वेज को प्रिजर्व करे, वो अपने खुद के इंस्टीट्यूट्स बनाए। So these are some of the rights which have been given to the minorities then. Okay, we don't want languages to vanish away from India. We don't want cultures to vanish away from India. So this is how the government gives importance to the minorities inside the country. Then there is yet another question which has been asked by Anaida from Takshashila that what is cognizance? Cognizance means it is a criminal offense. The same question has been asked by Susan from JB Nagar. कॉग्निजेंस का मतलब होता है क्रिमिनल ऑफेंस। ये एक ऐसा क्राइम है, सॉरी, एक ऐसा complaint है which is a criminal offense. If you have been put inside the jail, you might not even get a bail for it. Okay? दो टाइप के ऑफेंस होते हैं, एक होता है कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस और दूसरा होता है नॉन कॉग्निजेबल ऑफेंस. So cognizable offense is that kind of an offense that you will not even get a bail for it. Mm, so then there is yet another. Okay, I guess we'll continue with the chapter now. Then I'll pick up the doubts again. Okay. So we'll move ahead with the next problem that the world faces actually. So apart from reactors, next what the world faces is various environmental issues throughout the world. अगर तुम environment को hamper करते हो, तो जो humans है वो अच्छे से रह नहीं पाए. That means if you hamper the environment, you are hampering the human rights also. Okay. So for some students, this continue with the same. Okay, it's good to have general knowledge then. Fine. So talking about environment, even talking about environment, it is a bigger issue. If you hamper the environment, if you destroy the environment, that means it is ultimately going to affect you. It is going to affect your human rights. So just as human rights, even securing the environment को protect करना भी एक बहुत बड़ी बात है. We see that the environment is getting affected because of many reasons. If you can see here, they have been listed. You can see there is a large scale of industrialization which is going on. ऊपर से हम देखते हैं कि आजकल जो खेती बाड़ी होता है, okay, the agriculture which happens, in that we use chemical fertilizers, we use pesticides. Chemical fertilizers जो हम लोग use करते हैं soil को और भी ज्यादा बेहतर करने के लिए, ultimately when you do too much of cultivation, when you do too much of agriculture on a particular landmass using chemical fertilizers, it ultimately turns the soil barren. वो soil का quality खराब कर देता है. Pesticides की बात करें, we are trying to kill the mosquitoes, we try to kill those insects which affect the plant, which affect the crop, but even that is not good when it is being consumed by the consumers. Talking about the sound pollution which is being caused by vehicles. अगर तुम देखोगे रास्ते पे unnecessary there is a lot of honking which happens, especially it happens in the areas where there are hospitals, where there are educational organizations, जहाँ पे honking बहुत ही कम होना चाहिए. So here we see that there is a lot of sound pollution which is created because of the vehicles. Apart from that, talking about the nuclear reactors, we see that there are many nuclear reactors throughout India and throughout the world. ये न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर्स जो होते हैं, ये न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी को स्टोर करने के लिए बनाए जाते हैं, so that it is useful to supply electricity to generate more energy out of it. बट अल्टीमेटली जब ये न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर्स को ठीक से मेंटेन नहीं किया जाता, इट गिव्स आउट रेडिएशंस. ये जो रेडिएशंस न्यूक्लियर रिएक्टर्स से बाहर निकलते हैं, इट अल्टीमेटली अफेक्ट्स ह्यूमन हेल्थ. इट अल्टीमेटली लीड्स टू मेनी क्रॉनिकल डिजीजेस, हेरिडिटरी डिजीजेस आते हैं, कैंसर्स होते हैं एंड सो ऑन. Yes, Arman, you're absolutely right. I loved that example of yours. Yes, even Advait has answered the same thing. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, yes, it is one more another biggest concept. Okay. Next, then we have the leakages, oil leakages which happen in the entire ocean area. We see that there are many ships, there are many tankers which are carried along, carrying oil, carrying fuels. They go along the border areas, they go along the oceans and seas, and then ultimately they get spilled up over there, and that leads to pollution of water. It leads to oil leakages. Talking about the chemical gases, even they are unsafe for the environment. So Bhopal gas tragedy. Here, there is one more another example which I've got in the chat box. So yes, these are all the examples. I guess you people are more aware about it. You might be having EVS as the chapter then, as a subject, as a different subject then to be discussed. Fine. So these are many such environment issues which we face. In fact, every day, every year, we celebrate this Earth Day, which happens on 22nd of April 1970. So this is your objective question, that when is the Earth Day celebrated every year? It happens on 22nd of April. It started from 1970. We still celebrate it till date. Okay. Mm, so there is a question which has been asked by Sanskar, that what is privatization of economy? Privatization of economy, here it means that all the business houses, जितने भी businesses है एक देश के अंदर, वो सारे के सारे सरकार के हाथ में नहीं होते हैं. All these businesses are under the private sector. They are in control of the private individuals. Businessmen होते हैं, entrepreneurs होते हैं, ये इनके हाथों में ये पूरे के पूरे businesses होते हैं. So the government has no control over these businesses then. It has a minimum control, in fact. Example, United States of America. Yes. Okay. We'll move ahead with the next part now. We'll move ahead with the next part now. That as a result of awareness of what is environment safety, at an international level, there have been many meetings which have happened. By the time it was 1990s, बहुत सारे देश आपस में मिलते हैं यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, एंड दे डिसाइडेड टू कोऑपरेट ईच अदर. उन्होंने बोला कि हर एक देश एक दूसरे पे डिपेंडेंट है, and if every country is dependent on each other, they should start cooperating each other, and thereafter they should start, uh, giving them assistance in protecting the environment at a global level. So there is a threat which is caused by pollution or by leakage of oil and gases, which still remain a problem throughout the world. ऐसा नहीं है किसी एक कंट्री के वजह से हो रहा है, ये बहुत सारे देशों के वजह से हो रहा है, and it is a long term disaster. Okay. So, guys, with this for today, we'll end the lecture. We'll continue the same thing in the next lecture. In case if you have any queries, you can stay behind for the class and rest of the people can leave. Arman, you can go ahead with your doubt, whatever you have. Okay, so there is a question. What is secessionism? I'm so sorry, I cannot pronounce that. It means it is a withdrawal of a very large group. किसी चीज को तुम withdraw करते हो, that is called as secessionism. What are the main human rights? It's right to freedom, then it is right to equality, right to education, right to live your own life. These are some of the human rights which are there. Okay. Then there is this yet another question. Anaida, so basically talking about a juvenile, then will cognizable offense apply to a juvenile? Juveniles के लिए पूरा अलग से law है कि अगर उन्होंने कोई crime commit किया, what should be the exact punishment be given to them, and for the adolescent people then there is a different set of law. Next there is a question being asked by Arman, that is the McMahon line of India or China, as many say that it is not of both but of UN. First of all, talking about McMahon line, this line was being drawn by Britishers. तो ये जो मैकमोहन लाइन का जो ये बॉर्डर एरिया है इंडिया और चाइना के बीच में, ये ब्रिटिशर्स ये लाइन ड्रॉ करके गए हैं, which China is not ready to accept it. Okay. Next, there is another question which has been asked by Kaushiki. What is sovereign? Sovereign का मतलब होता है dignity. It has its own self-independence. For example, India is a sovereign country. It's a sovereign state. मतलब इंडिया किसी की गुलामी में नहीं है. इंडिया खुद अपने में बना हुआ एक देश है, आजाद देश है. उसकी खुद की सेल्फ रिस्पेक्ट और डिग्निटी है. Okay, so with this, we'll end the lecture for today. In case if you have any queries, you can leave it out for the next lecture then.